Hello, TOEFL students. I am Mark, one of the expert TOEFL teachers here at E2. And you may be here because you've been told that in your writing, you've got unclear positions, or perhaps you're having difficulty extending your ideas, or perhaps you don't have enough range in the grammatical structures you're using when you're writing. In today's video, we're going to look very carefully at how you can extend your answers using a few different techniques. By the end of this video, you'll hopefully be able to start using these techniques, but more importantly, hopefully you'll have a little bit more fun when you're writing. Today we're looking at essay writing and how to get a 4 or a 5 in your essay. Now, in order to do that, you need to extend the ideas that you write about in your essay. But how do we do that? How can we find different ways to express and continue extending our ideas? Today, we'll look at 3 techniques that you can use to help make those ideas clearer and fully extended. These techniques are how it works, effect, and global examples. And I'll go into those in detail in the video. Don't worry about them right now. Now, before we get into the techniques, let's take a minute to look at how to get the scores that you want. We'll take a look at a 5 and a 4 in the essay, and we'll see what exactly you need to do to get up to that score. Let's quickly take a look at a number 5. You can see here for a 5, you need well-organized and well-developed ideas, and you need to use appropriate explanations, exemplifications, and/or details. So this means you're extending your ideas and your ideas are clear. Another thing it wants is unity, progression, and coherence. This means that from one sentence to the next, it flows smoothly. If I'm reading it, it's not difficult to find the idea, or I'm not waiting to see, okay, I understand the language, but what is the point you're making? That should always be clear to the reader. And finally, displays syntactic variety, though it may have errors. Now, basically what that means is grammatical range. So you're able to use different sentence structures to express your ideas. Now, I also do want to take a look at a 4. For many of you, that's going to be more than enough to get the score that you want or to get into the program that you need the TOEFL exam for. Let's just take a look at that to see how it's a little bit different. For a 4, it says, addresses the topic and task well, does not fully elaborate. So even if you don't have all the extending ideas, but you have some, you'll be in an okay position to get a good score. It also says well-organized, well-developed, just like a 5, using appropriate and sufficient explanation. So it might not go into full detail, but it's giving enough detail. That's a little bit more what we'll be looking at today. It also says unity and progression, although there may be redundancy, digression, or unclear connections. We're going to try to avoid that today. And finally, it says demonstrates syntactic variety, though it will have occasional noticeable minor errors. So again, you've got a good range of grammar and sentence structures, but for a 4, you can make a few more grammatical errors. So do remember that. You want to have range of grammatical structures, but it doesn't always have to be perfect. Now that said, you want to have as few grammatical errors as possible, but don't get stressed out if you're finding that you're getting feedback from your teachers with your grammatical errors. Try to make less. All right, so let's take a look at our question. Now, here it is. Do you agree or disagree with the following statement? The government should always tell the truth. Use specific reasons and examples to support your answer. Be sure to use your own words. Do not use memorized examples. Very key important thing there. Don't just take ideas you've read and copy them verbatim into your answer. Now at E2, we have a number of lessons that go into the various ways that you'll organize and write your essay. How to do the introduction, the body paragraphs, and the conclusion. Today, we're really mostly going to look at the body paragraphs. And one of the techniques that you can use is to extend your ideas with the idea of effect. And in effect, it may look like this. You might use a phrase like as a result or consequently. Now, these are more basic structures. They're a little bit simpler, and you can use them and it's not a problem. Slightly more advanced forms might look like this. Full stop, this can lead to, and then you express the idea. You could also change it to comma, which can lead to. So there's many ways that you can show effect, and in our course we have all these different ways that you can extend your ideas. This is one grammatical structure we'll look at specifically here today. You'll see it shortly. Now the first thing we'll do, and this is very important to remember in your introduction, is you do want to have a clear position. So here's our introduction. Telling the truth is one of the most important aspects of running a government. Full stop. It helps build trust and public confidence. All right, so I've introduced the topic. Although governments should always try to tell the truth, comma, there are times when it may be appropriate to conceal it. So, in the introduction, I've now said I disagree. Yes, they should try to tell the truth, but there are times when they cannot. Now let's take a look at our first body paragraph. The first sentence here, governments should always have the goal of telling the truth. So here is the position. The rest of the paragraph will extend on this idea. This is because telling the truth builds public trust. So I've explained why. Next, I will explain how it works. The idea I've expressed is now going to get extended with an idea that shows exactly how this will happen. As governments are funded by citizens through their taxes, to do otherwise would be a crime. Now, in this paragraph, I've got a very specific example. For example, comma, every year the Australian government publishes their budget, and then at the end of the year publishes a report detailing whether or not their goals were met and if they overspent. All right, so I've given a real life example, and I know a lot of times TOEFL students and students of all test prep courses love to give real examples. We're gonna take a look at a bit of a variation on that. So instead of a specific example, we're gonna express this as a global example. The rest of the paragraph reads like this. If governments make a habit of lying, the government will quickly lose faith. The more accountable the government is, the more citizens will trust it. So in this case, I have now concluded the point that yes, if the government is not honest, it will not help them, and it is better for them to be honest, tell the truth, be accountable. But let's look at how I've changed this paragraph to use a global example instead of a specific example. In this paragraph, in the fourth sentence, I've changed it to say, governments should publish their plans and budgets, comma, continue to provide updates on the progress of their projects, comma, and be transparent about how the money is spent, including being honest about when mistakes are made. So in this example, I've used a more global example instead of coming up with a specific one. Now, both are fine. There is no penalty for using a different kind of example. The only thing is, often it's difficult in the moment to think of an example. So it might be better to just present your idea instead of trying to think of an example. I think this works quite well. And I don't want you guys to get stressed out trying to invent an example in the moment. Really, this test is allowing you to express your ideas. If you're trying to prepare for this in your test, just make sure that you know what you believe about how government should work. It's a very good idea to make some notes about that, really reflect on your ideas before sitting a test like TOEFL or any of the other English language tests. Now, moving on to the second paragraph. One reason, however, to conceal parts of the truth is that there are many dishonest people who will exploit government honesty. Now, here, my first sentence very clearly states the position and the topic. People will exploit it. Sadly, many people are only interested in their own ends and do not care about hurting others to achieve them. Then I explain how this works. In government initiatives, if secrets are not kept, criminals could exploit the information to make a quick profit. Now here, I do again have the chance to give an example. Now, personally, I don't know a lot about how organized crime works, so it's difficult for me to put this example in. So instead, I'm going to use effect. I will explain the effect of the previous sentence. This costs governments time and money, which could have real-life negative consequences for citizens, including job losses or inadequate funding for important projects. Again, here I might have said, as a result, governments will waste time and money. I've kept this a bit more simple and a bit more flexible by just saying this costs governments time and money, and then extending based on effect. So this whole paragraph has stated my position, then I explain how it works, and then I extend with effect. In the final part, I simply conclude my point and say, if governments want to protect the public good, it may occasionally be necessary to hide the truth. Simple, concludes my point. Now we'll look at the final body paragraph. As always, you guys, I've got 3 body paragraphs here. Sometimes we might have 2, you might have 4. There is no rule. I'm simply trying to present as many different examples as I can. Another reason to hide the truth is that people may misinterpret the information. So again, I've stated my position here. People might misinterpret the information. There we go. Then, how does it work? Or explain it. Having recently gone through a global public health crisis, it is clear that sometimes people do not fully understand the information they are given, or they draw wildly unexpected conclusions. So again, I've explained how it works. Then effect. This can lead to panic. After that, I conclude the point. Therefore, there may be times when governments may choose to delay the release of the truth while they find a way to clarify it, which is technically lying. Now, I've actually made a few changes here because as I was reading this, I thought, I feel like the idea is not completely done here. Now remember, I did say that governments should always try to tell the truth. And so I've added a little bit more here, and let's take a look at how that changes the paragraph. Admittedly, this is not an ideal situation. So this is really good. This connects back to my introduction. Admittedly, this is not an ideal situation, and so, therefore, thus, governments must be careful to not do this too often, or it could erode the public trust. The more transparent the government is, the more trusting citizens will be. So in this case, in this essay, I've stated that yes, they should always tell the truth, or at least that should be their goal. However, there may be times when they can't. I've also extended the ideas using global examples, the effect, and by explaining how something works. So let's take a look at the criteria again for a 4. It mentions here addresses the topic and task well. I have done that. Does not fully elaborate. In these paragraphs, I've done a fairly good job of elaborating. If I'm aiming for a 5, I am going to probably want to demonstrate a greater lexical or vocabulary range. And remember that the better range your vocabulary has, the more you can say with fewer words. And that's a really important thing about vocabulary. The more you read and the more you're able to use in your writing, the higher the score you can get because you're able to say more. Also, well organized and well developed using appropriate and sufficient explanations. I've done that. I've taken my idea, I've explained how I came to that conclusion. Next, displays unity, progression, and coherence, though it may show occasional redundancy or unclear connections. That hasn't happened much here. The ideas are clear and they progress quite neatly. Finally, demonstrates syntactic variety, so I have a range in grammatical structures. So you saw there we had if, we had this can lead to. We had various different types of grammatical structures. So that should get the score of a 4, possibly higher for the essay. All right, so that's all we're looking at here today. That is extending ideas, particularly in your body paragraphs. I hope you found that helpful. Please, as always, remember, first of all, get practice. You want to start writing very soon. You want to start writing right after this video. Secondly, you'll want feedback. This is extremely important. If you get it from us at E2, which we love to do for you, or you have your own teacher wherever you are, that's fine. You want to get as much feedback as possible, see what mistakes you're making, and then fix those mistakes. And finally, read and build your vocabulary. As I was saying before, the more range in vocabulary you have, the more you're able to say with fewer words. Remember, it's not about trying to get more words into your essay to increase the word count. It's actually trying to say more with fewer words. All right, everybody, that's it for today. I hope you found that helpful. Please like, share, subscribe, do all those wonderful things, and we'll see you again soon.